Welcome to section 4.3. In this section, we're going to use data to find equations for linear functions. Be aware that often we make an assumption that a function is going to be linear. As we saw in the last section, that means we assume we have this constant absolute rate of change called the slope. As you may recall, the equation of a linear function, generically, is y equals mx plus b. What does that mean? X is our independent variable, y is our dependent variable, m and b are parameters, meaning they're numbers that we get from the data so we can write the equation down. That way, if we want to know what y is given a value of x, we just plug in x and calculate y. Alternatively, if we want to know which x value results in a value of y, we can plug in the y and solve an equation for x. So this is telling us that one of the things that equations are used for is to make predictions when we're modeling a scenario. So before we get into how to construct the equations, let's talk about how we can use them to make predictions with a couple of examples. So let's start with our World of Warcraft example. Suppose our level is 23 and we're in this region where the number of XP we get from an equally leveled MOB kill is 45 at initial level plus 5 for each character level. My current level is 23. I need 1,500 more experience points to get to level 24. You actually need a little bit more, but let's say we've gotten that, and this is where we're at. And we want to know, because we want to be at level 24 before we take on our next major task. So we'd like to know, how many kills should I try to make in order to reach that level 24 so I can go on towards my next goal? Well, the first thing we need to know is how many XP we get for each equally leveled MOB kill at our level of 23. So we plug 23 in for character level, and we've got 5 times 23, which is 115. And we add the 45, and we get 160 XP for each of our equally leveled MOB kills. So that's good to know. Each one we get 160 XP. How many do we need? Well, remember, we want 1,500 more to reach level 24. So we just divide. 1,500 is what we need. Divide by 160 that we get per kill, which we used our equation to find. And we get 9.375 equally leveled MOB kills. Now we're not going to make 0.375 kills, so we'll just round that to 10. So we should wander around this part of the map where this equation works and try to complete 10 equally leveled MOB kills that will get us to level 24, and we can go off on the next major quest. Let's look at one other example, a more business-oriented example, and that has to do with consumer demand. So let's say we have this equation. The price that we should charge, given how many we want to sell, is negative 1.6 times the number we sell plus 32. Here, the number we sell Q is in thousands. So, for example, if I want to sell 13,000, that variable Q is equal to 13. Those are the units we're measuring. So there's a couple of questions we might ask. Let's say we want to sell 11,000. What price should we charge? Let's say we're a nonprofit and we want to offer this thing for free. How many of these goods or services should we be prepared to produce? These are two different questions, both of which can be answered with this equation. So for the first one, what should I charge if I want to sell 11,000? Bearing in mind that Q is in thousands, this tells us that Q equals 11, right? How many thousands? 11. So we plug 11 in for Q, and we calculate the price. P equals negative 1.6 times 11 plus 32. Perform the calculation. Order of operations requires us to multiply the 1.6 times 11 first and then add the 32. The answer you get is 14.4. That means that we should charge $14.40 if we want to sell 11,000 of our good or service. Let's look at the second question. Same equation, but now let's suppose that we're in a big city and this is a major service that's offered for free to, say, the homeless. How much of this good or service should you be prepared to produce? Given this demand, well, What that tells you, if we're offering it for free, is that the price is 0. So we plug in 0 for P and then solve for Q. So we have P equals 0, so 0 equals negative 1.6Q plus 32. Solve for Q by adding 1.6Q to both sides. So now we get 1.6Q equals 32. And divide. 32 divided by 1.6 is 20. So we should be prepared to produce 20,000 of our good or service if we're offering it for free. In the remainder of this section, we're going to, now that we know why we want an equation and how they can be useful, we're going to talk about how to use data that we're given verbally in order to find this equation. And keep in mind, we're assuming linearity. We are assuming a constant absolute rate of change.